I think we're going to begin our next session. Thank you so much for hanging with us. I'm Mark Williams, Associate Professor of Film and Media Studies at Dartmouth College. And I'm very happy to welcome as our first presenter, Valerie Hill, who's the Library Director at Peninsula College. Valerie.
All right, let me just see if you can hear me, and I'll get ready to share my you can hear me all right? Okay, great. And see if you're able to see me as well, and I'll get ready to share my screen. Let's see, get my slides up here, share my screen. And I'm happy to be here today. Let's see if the screen's shared here. Okay, let's see here. Okay, share screen. Hopefully you're able to see my slides. Oh, not yet. Okay. Okay, let's see. Share my screen. Well.
Green, share screen.
Yeah, got that.
Okay.
This desktop one.
Yeah, either your desktop or you can just share your PowerPoint presentation if you choose. That's one of the selections there.
Yeah, I want desktop, but it's not coming up. Okay, allow, okay, open system preferences. Okay, hopefully I can get my, doesn't want to let me share my screen. See if I can do it a different way. Okay, iPad, Google Chrome. Okay, desktop, no. Try it through Google Drive. No, sorry about that. It's just not letting me share my screen. Okay.
Valerie, I'm just going to quickly test.
Okay.
Are you seeing my screen now?
Yeah.
Zoom window. Okay, I'll stop sharing.
Mm-hmm.
So it is working for you.
Okay.
And I would suggest using the presentation. If the desktop isn't sharing, maybe you just want to select PowerPoint. You may see that open in the white window that comes up.
Okay, let me try that instead. Okay.
And then click the blue share button at the bottom right in that white window.
Okay, let's see here. Blue share button. I just don't think I have my PowerPoint on this computer. Okay. I just have my Google Slides on here, but I can download them real quick.
Okay.
Okay, okay, let's see. Do that real fast. Open them up real quick and see if that works. Okay, there's PowerPoint. And then I'll go back to Zoom. Okay, I'm going to share my screen now and see if I can do it with PowerPoint. And it's through desktop. Share.
You can share it through either your desktop or just select the presentation itself. There are a variety of options in the white share window that comes up. And then in the bottom right-hand screen, you make a selection, you click on it, it highlights it, and then you click the blue button in the bottom right corner.
Okay, it's just, it still says I have to go to open my preferences. It won't let me share. So I may just have to tell you. Okay, let's see.
Valerie, would you prefer that we come back to you? We could go to the next presentation and circle back?
Yeah, why don't you do that? Go to the next presenter and I'll see if I can get my
Okay,
screen.
And Jim, maybe you could private message Valerie and try and work through this.
Sure.
Thank you.
That sounds great.
That sounds great.
Okay, so we'll move on to Vincent Longo and Matthew Solomon at the University of Michigan, talking about their VR Citizen Kane. Vincent, I believe you're going to start.
Okay, let's see.
All right, can you hear me now?
We can.
Great, perfect. Share my screen here. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you, Mark. Thanks, everybody. Our project is a teaching and learning tool which allows students or any users to reshoot a scene from the famous film Citizen Kane. And they do so using a virtual camera in a 3D environment, which we've replicated one of the key scenes from the film. This virtual camera can be placed anywhere in the scene, and users have full cinematographic control over things like virtual lenses, the lighting. They can shoot it in different frame rates, as well as they can program various types of camera movement. This footage is then exported in 2D, very much shot like a film camera or a digital camera, and then you can export it into any video editing software, add sound, and you can essentially create an infinite number of versions of this scene. Currently, the program is compatible with Oculus. We also have a desktop version which works in Mac or PC. This project was created with several learning goals in mind. First, Matthew and myself teach media analysis. We teach the close viewing of films. And so one of our goals is to teach students how to think really carefully about how style, rather than just dialogue or narrative, affect the meaning of a scene. And so one way of doing that really effectively is to allow students to make changes to the scene and then compare and contrast, see how the scene, what's lost, what's gained from that. Also, this program becomes essentially a mobile film school, a film school in a can, and especially the desktop version eliminates expensive production equipment, actors, props, basically everything you would need to make something sort of as high quality as Citizen Kane was. The VR version is the same way. Of course, you need virtual reality equipment to do that, but it's still more accessible. We didn't just choose Citizen Kane because it's one of the most famous films of all time. Instead, the University of Michigan Special Collections Research Center has the world's largest collection of archival material related to Wells's career. And so we wanted this project not only to fit the U of M brand in that sense, but also to constantly point students to these archival materials because they're there for them to use, and we want them to consult them and immerse themselves in that as well. Don't have time to talk about too much about the construction of it, but the really fantastic team at the Duderstadt Emerging Technologies Group at the University of Michigan constructed the project both technologically and artistically. I had the pleasure of directing the motion capture shoot itself, but even that data was sent to their team who put it into the project. Hand it over to Matthew.
So the way this was embedded in the course is that students first did a shot breakdown of the 6 shots that Orson Welles chose for this scene and started thinking about what the meaning of those specific shot choices were. And next slide. Then they had an opportunity to see the platform. So this was implemented in a large lecture course with 150 students. So this was our introduction when we were still teaching in person to the VR interface. Next slide, please. And what I noticed right away, what we noticed as a teaching team was students were thinking a lot more dynamically about these spaces. So this sketch, the one on the next slide, gives you an idea of a kind of different kind of thinking that students were doing because they had the opportunity to explore this scene in VR and to really rethink how it would be done, with their own choices. We started in the XR visualization space at the Duderstadt Center, and you can go to that page. There's a promo video there of ours. And we actually had students in the lab initially working on this assignment in real time. and in groups, such that some people were in VR, some people were watching, right behind them. And we found a lot of advantages to that particular interface. Next slide. As you all know, we were not able to teach in person for the entire assignment. We switched midway to my timer. Switched midway to the desktop version. So we were very glad that we had created a desktop version, and that allowed, through the magic of the Duderstadt Center staff, students to complete the assignment in a remote format. And here are some of the different recuts that they came up with. You won't get to hear their great sound, but you'll get an idea of all the different possibilities that students imagined. And this coming term, we'll again be teaching remotely. I'll be doing it in a small group setting, a course that's entirely dedicated to Citizen Kane, in which we will get to use this tool for a couple weeks.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
That was so great, guys. And I'm sure you're going to get a lot of questions when we're done. Jim, can we circle back to Valerie, or should we go on to the next presentation?
I think we should go on just for now.
Okay. Okay. Then let me please welcome Erica Juriasingani, who represents a team working on the VAR lab. Erica.
Hi guys, thanks Mark for the introduction and thank you for having me here today. Let me go ahead and share my screen. So we are part of the Var Lab at Behrend, and I want to discuss some of the safety procedures that we have adopted in the lab to make sure that our XR resources such as our VR headsets are safely shared, especially during a time like now. So the big question is, why is this important? I think this is a pretty simple question. I stole a quote from Joe Parlock, writer at Forbes, and he just quickly discussed how VR headsets are a brilliant way to pick up diseases, and that he's seen some nasty ones picked up from a headset. So with that being said, it's extremely important that we maintain a safe environment, especially with things going on people's faces and such. So at Var Lab, it is a very important part that we strive to keep a clean environment. It's, I would say, one of the top priorities of our lab. So with that being said, what are the Var Lab practices? So first, we want to make sure that personal hygiene is in order. So before someone will put on a headset, we ask that they take a baby wipe, they wipe down their faces, get any sweat, dirt, anything off of their face that shouldn't be interacting with our headsets. And we also ask them to sanitize their hands. You never know where people's hands are, so make sure to eliminate any of those germs that could be touching all over the headsets and other equipment. Most importantly, when it comes to actually caring for the headsets directly, when someone is finished with the headset, we will take alcohol-free wipes and we will wipe down the headsets. We make sure to get all the cracks and crevices, the rubber seals, the nose pieces down in there. It's important whenever you have these wipes so that you do not touch the lens inside of the headset, because it could damage the headset. So for those closer areas to the lenses, we will use CPAP wipes to make sure that that area is disinfected as well. And products that have such, we use these silicone inserts. I don't know if you can see this too well, but this just slides right into the headsets. They're really simple to clean. You just pop them right out, you wipe them down, and then you just put them back in. In the long run, it's it's great for the environment as well. You save some money by not having to constantly buy stuff as well. Another product that we use to protect the headsets are disposable inserts. So if you look over here at this picture, we see a kid with a pretty funny looking mask over here on his face. That is what he's going to have on for our cloth material, because this Oculus Go has a cloth material. So it doesn't have that silicone insert. So we just ask that they put these on and before they use them. So with the onset of COVID, we have been looking at different ways as to how we can improve our ways of safely sharing these headsets and such. So we have just acquired a clean box. And so what a clean box is, it's a UVC box. It's a really great addition to the lab. It's a great way to make sure that we're sharing everything safely. So this is our clean box. We are hopefully getting it in within the next week. We've had some shipping issues, but this is easy setup. You just plug it into the wall and then you're ready to go. You turn it on, the green light means you're good to go. It has a 99.99% efficacy. It kills viruses. They have just tested it on COVID and it's accurate on that. They also include, will kill bacteria and fungi. While it's in this machine, there are air jets that are blasting away any dirt or debris that you are unable to reach. So it makes sure to get it as clean as it possibly can. There is a safety feature as well with this clean box. When you open up this door here, it will make sure to turn off the UVC lights so no harm can come to you at all. As well as adjustable hooks. This video is a little bit too slow for me talking, but these hooks adjust as well. You'll see her pull it up and down. Important to keep in mind whenever you're doing this machine is that you need to make sure to spray your nanotechnology spray on the headset. That's important as part of making sure that your headset becomes clean. You just spray it very generously all over the headset. You pop it in and then within 2 minutes, the headsets are good to go. So if you guys want any more information, make sure to check out our websites. And that's all I got for you.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Erica.
Thank you.
We'll move on to Richard Corey, who's the director of the VME Lab at the University of Maine. Richard, please go ahead.
Sure. Let's see. Let's do some share. I'm taking it it's working.
It is.
Great, that's excellent. So thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me. By the way, we understand HMD cleaning, so that was fantastic to see. I want to talk to you about our experience at the University of Maine and what happened right after the pandemic that shut us down. I understand a lot of universities kind of kept going or found a way to keep going, but for us, that was it. One of the things that happened was, why isn't it not going to the next screen? There we go. One of the things that happened was that our shutdown meant the entire campus closed down. We weren't allowed to run our human subject research anymore. And that has become a real problem because we were running, 200-300 people a year were coming through the lab. And we've been, pretty efficient at running people through different technologies. So the first thing that happened after we realized that we were closed down was how do we continue? Because as we talked to our program officers for a lot of our federal grants, we suddenly realized that they didn't know what was happening either. So, our deadlines and everything were continuing going on. So we had to quickly look at what do we need? And we broke this down to experimental control. We needed a way to be able to do that remotely. We needed to find a way to do some level of physical interaction. We needed a way to do efficient research design, and we needed to have collaborative communication. And I put in there paired programming. We kind of use paired programming in a bit of a different way. We have our researchers that work with our actual programmers, so they can see what's going on, so the data comes out right, so we don't have to do a pilot test and do it again. So we've had 12 years experience in VR and AR, and it was really funny to have the academic community come to us and go, oh, hey, what's the solution? What do we do next? So for us, it was like, well, we know we couldn't make it right off. So we knew we needed to find a VR solution that was off the shelf. We needed a quick transition that would take our in-lab, in-person human subject trials and shift it to some sort of a stable environment that people can use, and it had to be used by all. And that was man, that was a heck of a trick. So we went through a long list of available software out there. And what we ended up coming up with is these few that we thought were going to be a possible solution moving forward. What I have here is kind of our breakdown from us doing some real interesting user studies and user tests with this to look into what was effective, what wasn't. And I mean, this is pretty self-explanatory, but there was a few aspects of this that were really interesting. Ease of use, when we talk about this, and I know Matthew brought this up earlier and several other people have talked about using different virtual environments. Ease of use, we rated this not based on people that know technology, but people that have not really done a lot of VR or any kind of advanced technology use. So that it turned out that a lot of these worked out pretty well. And the motion sickness that comes with a lot of it. What we found out was that, yeah, we're looking at some real problems trying to actually take human subjects, especially some of our older human subjects that we do testing on. We found real big problems, and we started talking to the science advisory boards and people in that area to say, what are we missing here? And one of the things that came up was that, you know, in order to have this work well so people don't get sick, you certainly need to have some level of 4K video looking, you know, like I do now. And you need to drop your, you know, frame, I mean, you increase your frame rates and make sure that that, you know, gets really, really good when it comes down through it. And so we started looking at this stuff going, okay, so they're saying, the people we've been talking to and what we've been reading, they're saying about 400 megabits is what you're going to need for a stable connection. The average American user is somewhere around 33. We knew we needed HMDs or some equivalent devices in people's houses for them to use. And it turns out that, you know, we did the digging and roughly about 2% of worldwide tech users have some sort of a head-mounted display, a VR display. We need to eliminate VR sickness. We know that people who have not been experienced to this a lot or don't play games, it can be up to 70% of the people get sick. So what we knew, we had a pretty big uphill battle to look into this. And the most recent thing, and some of you might have seen studies have been coming out, that about a third of the population right now is experiencing depression because they're not connecting with others. So we started to look at, okay, what's going to be needed for the future and how are we going to build this out? So these are some of the ideas that we started to come up with. One of the biggest ones on here that I wanted to talk to you about is the accessibility issues. We know from the academic standpoint, there's a lot of troubles with BVI and accessibility of online video content. And it gets even worse when you make it VR content, because somebody who's blind has a hard time seeing a video. It gets even harder seeing virtual reality. But we just, you know, I can say this, anybody's got a good solution for doing human subject research and where we can see it, I'll take it. But we've found that there were some really interesting problems moving forward. And I share a lot of the sentiments that came out today. This is definitely has potential for the future. I don't think it's there yet, but we're certainly very close.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Richard.
Welcome.
Jim, can we go back to Valerie? Is she ready to go?
Yes, Valerie switched to a new computer, so she won't have video, but she does have her slides ready, and we're going to give it a shot.
All right. All right. Please, Valerie, you may proceed. Should we be able to hear her?
Yes, I see she has an open mic. And Valerie, I know you can hear us. We're not hearing you right now. Maybe want to try one more break? One more presenter?
Sure.
Okay.
Let's do that. So Valerie, you're in our thoughts and prayers. We'll go on for the time being to Andy Rodriguez from the University of Arizona. Andy, please.
And Val, you'll have to stop sharing if you would. We'll work it out. Thank you.
Andy, are you there?
Who's our next presenter, Mark? Andy Rodriguez?
Andy Rodriguez? Is Andy with us?
Yeah, I actually don't see Andy in the user list at this time.
Okay. In that case, let's go to Sam Gotchman and Anavision. Sam. Looks like we have Sam and
Great.
Kathy.
Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Let me share. All right. So thanks for having us. So we know this quarantine has been a challenge, obviously, but it's also been an opportunity to create access to impactful learning experiences through technologies like VR and AR. And it's been an opportunity for us to think differently about what the classroom is and what it can be and how technology can let us do new things for education. And so I'm Sam Gotchman, the founder and partner of Anavision, and I'm here with Kathy Wu, the current project manager. And we work with a team of awesome developers and designers, students at Dartmouth College. So rather learning about things like evolution from a textbook or a lecture, what if you could see through the eyes of an animal with an extreme trait? This would be much more experiential and intuitive and an immersive way to learn. So as a tarsier, a tiny primate with enormous eyes from Southeast Asia, a student can leap from a tree to tree and capture insects. And they notice that human eyes aren't meant for this environment or these activities. As a honeybee, a student can fly around a meadow and switch visions to the bee vision and see ultraviolet bullseyes on flowers that help the bees find nectar, something that's invisible to human eyes because we don't see ultraviolet light. And so comparing these visual systems throughout this experience, a student can understand the difference in worldview and understand things about the lesson at hand, such as how evolved traits are adaptive for an environment. But this can also apply to so many other disciplines besides evolutionary biology. There are things like comparative anatomy, perceptual psychology, optical physics, but even things like philosophy and English classes, thinking about different ways of experiencing the world. And so throughout the years of development of this project, we've tested with a lot of different kinds of people, students and age groups within the Dartmouth community, across New Hampshire and Vermont, in natural history museums, and even at conferences across the country. And this has helped us get a lot of great feedback that has helped us iterate the VR project. And so as we did more rigorous testing, we started to get results that demonstrate the effectiveness of this VR system as a teaching tool in the classroom. And so we published a paper about this project and VR in general as a teaching tool. And so we found that during our test that students really enjoyed this compared to traditional classroom methods like reading from a textbook or being talked at through a PowerPoint slide. And so they also understood the goals of the lessons and the takeaways from those lessons. For example, that having enormous eyes lets them see better and navigate their environments better in a nocturnal environment.
So even though this project wasn't specifically designed for remote learning, it's naturally appropriate for this new kind of learning environment, assuming that tech is available to the students. But despite being remote, because the experience was designed to supplement more traditional forms of classroom learning, it can still be facilitated by a professor in the context of whatever their curriculum might be. And because of that, we want to continue working with professors to integrate this project into their classrooms and labs to maximize learning impact for students. And needing to be remote has taught us a lot about our own process as well. So here you can see the team members that have worked on this project throughout various terms, and you can see that it's been going on since before we had to go remote. So we had to adapt to collaborating on this project remotely, since we didn't have the physical space of the lab where we could more or less rely on running into teammates to ask questions and update each other on our progress. And because of that, we had to develop better practices of code sharing and sharing assets with each other, and learn how to best communicate with each other about our own progress, whether that's over Zoom or Slack, to ensure that we don't do any duplicate work and that each team member has a good sense of the project's overall direction. And even though these are things that we had to learn to have an effective remote project, these are practices that we'll take into the future, whether we're remote or otherwise.
That's great.
And just to wrap up real quick, as technology like VR and AR become better integrated into the classroom and their costs go down, this will be a much more accessible experience for professors and teachers to use. And whether or not the future classroom is remote or separated, this current time can really help us understand and apply what we learn about the individualized learning experience and how to make the classroom even more personally relevant, memorable, and impactful for a student, so that we can create an effective classroom no matter what form it takes.
All right, thank you, Sam and Kathy. Very nice presentation. So we're going to try and go back to Valerie Hill, and
Sure.
we have our fingers crossed.
Okay, I think you're going to be able to hear me now.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay,
that's great.
Yes, and it's crazy after 15 years working in virtual environments to have so much trouble in this one. I'm going to get my screen ready to share here now, and hopefully you can see it.
We can.
Okay, great. And so we'll get started here. With so many worlds and so little time. So I'm Dr. Valerie Hill, and I've been researching virtual environments for about close to 15 years. And so I want to talk today about some virtual spaces that I've encountered along the way, along with some colleagues of mine that are exploring criteria for choosing, the best space for the job. And I've loved all the presentations so far, talking about balancing between, bringing VR into the classroom and face-to-face and finding that balance. There are tons of virtual spaces out there, virtual worlds. In fact, there are so many worlds and so little time, so it really takes a lot of us, a lot of people exploring, sharing the pros and cons in order to fully understand our options. And so all of us that are here on Zoom, it's why do we need to look beyond this space? And I think all of us understand why. Sometimes it's just observation when you're in a space like this, when people are talking. And sometimes I almost feel like there is, you see all the people, but you're almost distracted by all the various backgrounds. I'm kind of glad my webcam didn't work, because it's like you don't really need to see behind, I'm drinking a cup of coffee or the green screen image. It really makes me feel more separated from you than connected to you. And several people today have mentioned the sense of presence that you get in virtual spaces. You feel more together than you do when you're just looking at a webcam and where you feel kind of that you're really separate. So I've been working as a virtual world librarian for about 12 years and learning how to connect and collaborate in these virtual environments. One of the biggest things I think is an advantage is that sense of presence in a sustainable, persistent place, meaning that when you log off, it's still there. And using avatars, I think, is also kind of important, because when you have an avatar, you represent yourself, you're all in that shared space, and it's authentic. You need to be authentic in an authentic simulation that has embedded whatever curriculum you want for education. Without that background distraction. And also, as we find the criteria for all these spaces and the tools, we want the tools to be able to allow us to interact productively, and allow for some back channeling, which sometimes you don't get it with a headset. I sometimes feel like my hands are tied behind my back. Some good tools for back channeling. Some of you are probably familiar with Discord, and also having maybe a different groups that you can go to besides Facebook and Twitter. We created Metaverse Libraries as a Google group just to talk about what we're doing and connect different educators together. So I mentioned I am a virtual world librarian, and I work in Second Life has been the main space that I've worked for a number of years. The community virtual library is a real library, just like any physical world library, in a virtual world, with events, programs, exhibits, workshops, conferences, anything that you might find in a physical library. So I've mentioned our main branches in the virtual world of Second Life, which is still around. People are like, that still happens. But we have other branches in a lot of virtual environments that I might mention to you. But we've been criticized for years about this steep learning curve in Second Life. And of course, there's a lot of other obstacles that we just talked about with the VR headsets. And yes, there may be a steep learning curve, but for those who have adopted these spaces, Second Life has all of the advantages and criteria that we're trying to get into VR spaces, and it is still sustainable. So there's a lot of other worlds out there, though. If it's too steep for your educators and administrators to adopt, there are web-based virtual worlds like Cyber Lounge, where we have done a lot of presentations, 3D web worlds, some spaces that, and it also solves that accessibility issue because you can access some of these on a cheap laptop or on a Chromebook, or some of them even on other digital devices. You don't have to download a client. So those are some of the spaces that we've investigated as educators. And then Second Life released their open source code. There are a lot of open source worlds built on that code, such as Kitely, Avicon, OpenSim. The Community Virtual Library has built a digital citizenship museum in the virtual world of Kitely. And we have experts on all different kinds of topics, from cybersecurity and digital archival, digital legacy, how to teach even young children how to be good digital citizens. It's all right there in our Digital Citizenship Museum. So there are spaces that are open source worlds where people can connect, collaborate, and embed high quality curriculum. But then, right now, the VR headsets are kind of all the rage. They have exploded into educational spaces. But after researching for a number of years, I'm really beginning to believe that desktop VR is just as important as headset VR. Many of you have talked about how after an hour you feel kind of nauseous, kind of, a little bit uncomfortable. I sometimes feel trapped, and I like to call it a disposable experience, because you go there one time, you do what you need to do, and then pop, it just disappears and you don't need to go back. And there's a place for that, but there's also a place for sustainable virtual spaces where you go again and again and you can build collaboratively without having to learn Unity or Unreal Engine and have to import all of those assets. A lot of the virtual worlds that I have been in, students can build right away, and you don't spend all of the time teaching them how to build, rather than teaching them what the curriculum is that you are really wanting them to learn. So I think VR worlds are virtual reality, whether you have a headset or not. So some of the virtual reality worlds that we've been exploring with my librarian and educator colleagues are Engage, Mozilla Hubs. I spoke recently in AltSpace VR and in Verbella, some presentations. And on here you can see the VR headset, and Sansar is the world in the middle, which was built by Linden Labs, the creator of Second Life. It's a beautiful space, but you don't have all the tools to create like you do in Second Life. So there are pros and cons of all these different worlds. And, it's a lot more trouble to learn to create and build with a VR headset as it is when you're on a desktop world. So I think there are advantages to all of these different types of virtual environments that we need to explore, research, and share with each other. And we can only do that together. So if you're new to this, you really want to join a Virtual Explorers team, because you cannot keep up with so many worlds with so little time unless you join a team. And so what we've been doing at the Community Virtual Library is connecting through our office hours in various worlds, because you can't go to all of them. It's really hard to go to all of them and keep up with all the great things that are happening in these virtual spaces. So we created a spreadsheet where, and I know you can't see this slide, it's just an example of what it looks like. And it shares all the worlds that I'm talking about and who's in them at what time. So you can go connect with somebody and talk with a real person and learn about what's going on for education in those worlds. So I wanted to leave my contact information up here on this final slide. I really strive to be an authentic avatar, and that's why I put my profession in my name, librarian. I put books on my head of my avatar so people can find me. And I think it's important that if we're going to connect with others, we need to be authentic in these virtual world spaces. And because, you know, I want to leave you with this final thought. We all live in virtual spaces. We're all in digital culture, whether you have an avatar or not. But rather than simply observing by peeking in the windows of webcams, I think maybe we'd learn better in a shared environment where we can interact, collaborate with all the best technology tools. So maybe I will connect with some of you in another virtual environment space beyond Zoom.
Great, thank you, Valerie. Glad we finally got that to go.
Yes, thank you.
And we'll end this session. We'll have a little time for Q&A, but our final speaker for the session will be Matthew Lewis from The Ohio State University. Take it away, Matt.
Cool, thanks. Okay, let me do the screen share. You can hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, can you see that? Cool, okay. Hi, I'm Matt Lewis, and I'm going to start with just a little bit of quick context. I'm an assistant professor at OSU's design department, where I've been encouraging our students to use different technologies. Let me get this window out of the way, cool. And I have a joint appointment at ACAD, which is our Center for Computer Graphics Research, and my position's funded by a Translational Data Analytics Institute, where my students have been prototyping technology ideas for the past couple of years. You can see the space in the slide there. So our safe access to physical spaces like these is now limited. So I've been working on ways for us to create virtual versions of these spaces and use simulated technologies. So I'm going to show you my progress and talk about my motivations and strategies and hopefully get some feedback. So while there's many options, the main strategies I'm pursuing are trying to choose more affordable and accessible tools and processes, letting the students simulate interactive system components like simply controlling a smart light from a tablet virtually. I'm relying on web-based software to encourage collaborative making and sharing, and I'm trying to use panoramic photos to virtually recreate familiar environments. So what I mean by that is just using panoramic pictures to model 3D environments that are good enough for prototyping and triggering memories and presence. So the top image here shows a 360 photo of TDAI's visualization lab. That image is then used as a texture for the 3D model on the bottom, and you can now walk around in that as a VR or AR space. So while there's products that do this sort of modeling, I've found them to mostly be too challenging to use or too expensive in many cases. So I've been working on a generic workflow in my favorite 3D modeling software, and I'm working hard to avoid any difficult to understand algorithms and just trying to design a simple manual process that anybody who can learn some basic modeling and texturing will be able to understand and use. I'm hoping to this year move this workflow to Blender, which is modeling software that's a bit more accessible than the software I use, which is Houdini. Note that this process is way more manual and basic than photogrammetry or 3D scanning, but I'm hoping it will be much more accessible for our students. So here's an example of a space that I care about a lot that I've been using virtually this summer to work out a workflow. It's our Aikido dojo that we haven't been able to use since the beginning of March. And this is just a recording from my phone, but of me walking around inside an augmented reality model of the space while actually outside in my physical backyard. exploring virtual web-based XR models while outside in any available physical space has some really intriguing potential. And sorry about what Zoom is probably doing to the frame rate you're seeing. It'll look smooth if you look at this later on my website. This is just a static environment displayed in Sketchfab, which is great, but to simulate interactive technologies, you need some more tools. And I've been working with A-Frame, which is basically HTML for WebXR. I've been using A-Frame in Glitch with a Quest and its web browser. And I guess for those who aren't familiar, Glitch is a simple free online tool for creating web applications. It's got an online code editor that lets you build virtual spaces as easily as you were working on a Google Doc. So 5 minutes, a few quick final thoughts. I've been talking about software and data, but this past year, I also had my students start working with microcontrollers and sensors. And I keep wondering about the possibility of my students building custom low-end XR hardware and input devices, the way that some of them might build 3D printers or drones. After more than one company that I was relying on was eaten by Apple, I'm growing increasingly wary of encouraging them to be dependent on closed commercial products and platforms. And I also try to keep in mind the privacy trade-offs that come with the capabilities that we're valuing. And last, as we recommend our resources to our students, we should keep in mind the supportiveness of the different communities associated with those resources. So in addition to Glitch, I'd encourage you to take a look at the very inclusive P5JS and Adafruit community statements online as nice examples. And that's my time, so thanks. And there's my email address. Please email me with questions and look at my website for more information as I figure this all out. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Matt. That was really great. Just to keep everybody on their toes, we do have one final speaker. Andy Rodriguez is able to join us from the University of Arizona. And we'll probably, just to warn people, we'll probably go over a few minutes so that we can entertain some Q&A. But for the time being, take it away, Andy.
All right, thank you, Mark. So I'm here to talk about a project called The Floating Farm. It's really working in collaboration with a 4-H group here at the University of Arizona, the cooperative extension, to bring AR development to students and instructors alike. The term was actually coined by my kid brother, Eisen. It was in a combination of experimenting with AR. He was playing around with the software one day and he kind of came up with, oh, here's my farm, we want to see it? And we called it a floating farm. And voila, we had a title for this potential project down the line. Now, there is no such AR course that I've seen to what we were trying to aim for. It was trying to implement, okay, we're in a situation where perhaps the instructor doesn't have computers for everybody. Perhaps the kids are more tactile workers. We were trying to solve all these problems that come across different forms of AR technology, but still give some content, so that way students can still build in the software Unity, Vuforia, and 3D modeling software Tinkercad. And there was also some other issues that we came across, such as these two flyers for advertisement. When we say augmented reality, that terminology shunned away a lot of students. We didn't actually see too many enrolled for our first workshop a couple summers ago in 2017. But once changing the format, the name even, and making it seem more appealing, we were starting to figure out that these large terms in this technology, a lot of people still don't quite understand what it is or to the extent what they can do with it. It's just a couple of hurdles along the development process, which led to our decision to first teach this content through a workbook. Students can keep notes, they can journal their 4-H log so it meets those guidelines, and that way they're able to still put some artistic form into the development side of the AR software. This is our first group from last summer. it was a successful run. We had about 5 students. One was a little shy, so they didn't want to take the group photo. But in short, they used marker augmented reality through the software Unity, and they developed their own logos for their virtual farms. We also had a chance for them to, draw in class, get to know one another, and experiment with the software. And they also received one-on-one guidance, so that way we were able to help them out with that. Now that transformed into a second edition. I'm just going to skip this very quickly. A second edition that includes a bit of a cleaner format. It actually better illustrates the different processes of how they can make the virtual farm, beginning with what is AR, providing more of a historical background, then going into 3D modeling with the land, infrastructure, how are you really fleshing out your project, and also just providing titles that are fun. They give an idea of what you need for your overall project, but then it goes more into depth of, okay, the plants and animals that's in line with 3D modeling, infrastructure, perhaps that has to do more with marker creation, and so on and so forth, along with some troubleshooting tech support towards the end in case there were any issues. This following summer, we decided to add a website. So that way students can have more content. Perhaps they can't even join the courses that we're now providing via Zoom. And that way they have slideshows now, they have videos, they also have the accompanying guide that we're reformatting again to just better illustrate where the software is at now, and also include more of the student projects, because overall, what we've been seeing from students is if they can see examples of where they can take this, the inclination to take this beyond just the workshop seems higher. We haven't received any official data since we're still in the experimental phase, unfortunately, but with our second reiteration, it's looking pretty promising. With the floating farm webpage, we're also able to show student projects. So we can actually host these augmented reality farms. And with each farm, the student can put their description. There's even a place for an AR code, so that way you don't necessarily need to download any additional software to see the farm. And you can also interact with 3D models that are embedded in the website as well. So it allows for the students to host their project elsewhere, but also have other people experience it in different formats. So that way it's a little bit easier distribution. And this website also accompanies more instructor guides, a little bit more fleshed out what you're going to be doing each session. So that way from the instructor's point of view, even if you haven't worked with AR, you have some background and some support on how to give the materials more efficiently. That was a little bit long, I apologize, but I'm more than happy to chat. You can send me an email. I've also left the website for both STEMrise, the 4-H group that we're working with, and the Floating Farm webpage.
That is great. Thank you so much, Andy.
Of course.
So we have a little bit of time for questions. The chat monitor is not volunteering any at the moment. So one of the issues that's been raised, but in quite a variety of contexts, is the notion of blended learning. I wonder if any of our speakers, maybe if we have time, if all of our speakers could just address that as a concept. I think it's terribly important to the COVID era that we're all suffering through. In some instances, it's had to do with accessibility and BVI users, a lot of different age groups, faculty, students, subdivisions. Could I ask our speakers to talk a little bit about blended learning? Or should I pick someone? Valerie, go ahead. And then Matthew.
Sure. I think it's really important to think about blended learning, especially by age group. If you're dealing with really young children, they really need much less digital activity and much more physical activity, especially, really, really young children. And then the older people are, the more that they can let go of the physical world and completely be immersed. So part of blended learning, I think, is really understanding the psychological development of learners. And it really relates to digital citizenship, which is my passion. Digital citizenship starts now at birth, if not before. Parents, they upload sonograms before their kids are even born. We all live in digital worlds. And it's like understanding digital citizenship is absolutely essential to our culture. And it relates very much to blended learning. We have to learn a balance between the physical world and the virtual world.
Great, thank you. Matthew?
I think we noticed certain affordances that students, even though they're working in VR with headsets, being in the same physical space produced a different kind of learning. So that obviously changed when we went strictly online, but I do think it's something where we ought to be thinking about people who are in the same space, some in VR, some not in VR, thinking about possibilities there, because what we saw in the lab was really exciting, but it was like nothing we could have imagined.
Yeah, to add on to that too, I think the VR version, you have the immersion. In some cases, you have some group work, but it's also physically exhausting to shoot that scene. When well shot it literally took almost 8 hours to do. And so to sit in VR for 8 hours to reshoot it themselves is overwhelming. So the desktop version allows for them to take some space back, to do it more on their own time from their own space, which is just crucial for getting the work done.
That's great. Matt?
Yeah, I wanted to mention, not only do we have people in such different circumstances, some people in labs, some people in classrooms, some people, in their living room or wherever. I just a couple weeks ago went to, I don't know if anybody else attended the XR Access Symposium that was about different kinds of accessibility for VR and so on. And thought about 100 different other circumstances that people are trying to access VR from that I'd never considered before. So as they get their talks online and so on, I might recommend people check that out as well.
Richard, did you have more to add if you're still available?
Sure. I mean, it's, you mentioned the BVI part of it, and thank you. The few people dropped some links in there looking at that, but there's some bigger issues, especially when you're talking blended learning. I like what Val said, because it's all a user. It all is about the user and how can we get the information to the user in the best way possible for them to learn it, grasp it, and understand, what you're trying to say. And, I'll give you one of the most interesting problems we've had in the last few months. The BVI community is asked to solve the problem. How do they know what 6 feet is? And, we're working on it. I don't know what the answer is, but, so when you start to look at how do you cross different technologies to make that work, it gets really, really tricky. So my 2 cents in that whole thing.
Yeah. Sam, go ahead. Are you there? Can we hear Sam?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I think I echo what the others have said, and I want to acknowledge that the baseline for blended learning is changing now, because if you think of it as sort of a complementary system of virtual and then more traditional classroom stuff, the more traditional classroom stuff has changed to be virtual as well. But taking into account that balance, in our project, we found that that the learning experience was most effective when there's a combination and not just one or the other. So if students were seeing through the eyes of the animal as the entire lesson, they probably wouldn't grasp a ton because the context isn't there. And vice versa, when you have a traditional lecture, there's no way to really experience and appreciate firsthand what we're actually talking about. And so in our project, when students were actually able to literally see the difference between visual systems and how they weren't able to do certain things like navigate around an environment or perform certain activities. In human vision, when they switch, they're actually able to, the lesson sort of kicks in at that point. What they learned about adaptation in the regular classroom now comes in and becomes a lot more impactful for them personally.
Very nice. Thank you, everyone, for a fascinating panel. Sorry about some of the tech glitches, but I think we made it. And I'll hand things over to Barbara, who is going to